we're going to read chapters 26, 27, and 28 in wholes, and that actually ends part one of the book. So today we're going to finish part one, and then next time we'll begin on part two. There were no telephones, but word spread quickly through the small town. By the end of the day, everyone in Green Lake had heard that the school teacher had kissed the onion picker. Not one child showed up for school the next morning. Miss Catherine sat alone in the classroom and wondered if she lost track of the day of the week. Perhaps it was Saturday. It wouldn't have surprised her. Her brain and heart had been spinning ever since kissing Sam. She heard a noise outside the door. She suddenly saw a mob of men and women carrying and storming into the school building. They were all led by Trout Walker. "There she is!" Trout shouted. "The devil woman!" The mob was turning over desks and ripping down bulletin boards. She's been poisoning your children's brain with books," Trout declared. They all began piling all the books in the center of the room. "Think of what you're doing!" cried Miss Catherine. Someone made a grab for her, tearing her dress, but she managed to get out of the building. She ran to the sheriff's office. The sheriff had his feet on his desk and was drinking a bottle of whiskey. "Mornin', Miss Catherine," he said. "They're destroying the schoolhouse," she said, gasping for breath. "They'll burn it down if someone doesn't stop them." "Just calm your pretty self down a second," the sheriff said, "and tell me what you're talking about." He got up from his desk and walked over to her. "Trout Walker has—" "Now don't you go back saying anything bad about Charles Walker," said the sheriff. "We don't have much time," urged Catherine. "You've got to stop them." "You're sure pretty," said the sheriff. Miss Catherine stared at him in horror. "Kiss me," said the sheriff. She slapped him across the face. He laughed. "You kissed the onion picker. Why won't you kiss me?" She tried to slap him again, but he caught her hand. She tried to wriggle free. "You're drunk," she yelled. "I always get drunk before a hanging." "A hanging? Who?" "It's against the law for a black man to kiss a white woman." "Well, then you'll have to hang me too," said Catherine, "because I kissed him also." "It ain't against the law for you to kiss him," the sheriff said, "only for him to kiss you." "We are all equal under the eyes of God," she declared. The sheriff laughed. "Then if Sam and I are equal, why won't you kiss me?" He laughed again. "I'll make you a deal. One sweet kiss, and I won't hang your boyfriend. I'll just run him out of town." Miss Catherine jerked her hand free. As she hurried through the door, she heard the sheriff say, "The law will punish Sam, and God will punish you." She stepped back into the street and saw smoke rising from the schoolhouse. She ran down to the lakefront where Sam was hitching Mary Lou to the onion cart. "Thank God I found you," she sighed, hugging him. "We've got to get out of here now." "What?" "Someone must have seen us kiss yesterday," she said. "They set the schoolhouse on fire. The sheriff said he's going to hang you." Sam hesitated for a moment, as if he couldn't quite believe it. He didn't want to believe it. "Come on, Mary Lou." "We have to leave Mary Lou behind," said Catherine. Sam, Sam stared at her for a moment. There were tears in his eyes. "Okay." Sam's boat was in the water, tied to a tree by a long rope. He untied it, and then they waded through the water and climbed aboard. His powerful arms rowed them away from the shore, but his powerful arms were no match for Trout Walker's motorized boat. They were a little more than halfway across the lake when Miss Catherine heard the loud roar of the engine. Then they saw the ugly black smoke. These are the facts. The Walker boat smashed into Sam's boat. Mr. Walker shot Sam and killed him and left him in the water. Catherine Barlow was rescued against her wishes. When they returned to shore, she saw that they had killed Mary Lou. That all happened 110 years ago. Since then, not one drop of rain has fallen on Green Lake. You make the decision. Whom did God punish? 3 days after Sam's death, Miss Catherine shot the sheriff as he was drinking his coffee. Then she carefully applied red lipstick and kissed him on the forehead. For the next 20 years, Kissin' Kate Barlow was one of the most feared outlaws in all of the West. Chapter 27. Stanley dug his shovel into the ground. His hole was about 3.5 feet deep in the center. He grunted as he pried up the dirt and then flung it to the side. The sun was almost directly overhead. He glanced at his canteen lying beside his hole. He knew it was half full, but he didn't take a drink just yet. He had to drink sparingly, but he didn't know who would be driving the truck the next time it came. 3 days had passed since the warden had scratched Mr. Sir. Every time Mr. Sir delivered water, he poured Stanley's straight onto the ground. Fortunately, Mr. Pendanski delivered the water more often than Mr. Sir. Mr. Pendanski was obviously aware of what Mr. Sir was doing because he always gave Stanley a little bit extra. He'd fill Stanley's canteen, let Stanley take a long drink, and then top it off again. It helped, too, that Zero was digging some of Stanley's hole for him. Although Stanley had expected the other boys didn't like to see Stanley sitting around while they were working. They would say things like, "Who died and made you king?" Or, "It must be nice to have your own personal slave." When he tried pointing out that he was the one who took the blame for the sunflower seeds, the other boys said it was his fault that they spilled. "I risked my life for those seeds," Magnet said, "and all I got was a lousy handful." Stanley also tried to explain that he needed to save his energy so he could teach Zero how to read, but the other boys just mocked him. "Same old story, ain't it, Armpit? The white boy sits around while the black boy does all the work. Ain't that right, Caveman?" "No, that's not right," Stanley replied. "No, it ain't," X-Ray agreed. "It's all right. It ain't right." Stanley dug out another shovel of dirt. He knew X-Ray wouldn't have been talking like that if he was teaching Zero to read. The X-Ray would be talking about how important he was and how he would need rest. So he would be a better teacher. Right. And ain't that true? He did need to save his strength so he could be a better teacher, although Zero was a quick learner. Sometimes, in fact, Stanley hoped the warden was watching with her secret cameras or microphones so that she'd know Zero wasn't as stupid as everyone thought. From across the lake, he could see the approaching dust. He took another drink from his canteen, then waited to see who was driving the truck. The swelling on Mr. Sir's face had gone down, but it was still a little puffy. There had been 3 scratch marks down his cheek. 2 of the marks had faded, but the middle scratch must have been the deepest because it still remained. It was a jagged purple line running from his eye all the way to his mouth, like a tattoo of a scar. Stanley waited in line, then handed his canteen. Mr. Sir held it up to his ear, shook it, smiled at the swishing sound. Stanley hoped he wouldn't dump it out. To his surprise, Mr. Sir held the canteen under the stream of water and filled it. "Wait here," he said. Still holding Stanley's canteen, Mr. Sir walked past him, then went around to the side of the truck into the cab where he couldn't be seen. "What's he doing in there?" asked Zero. "I wish I knew," said Stanley. A short while later, Mr. Sir came back out of the truck and handed Stanley his canteen. It was still full. "Thank you, Mr. Sir." Mr. Sir smiled at him. "What are you waiting for?" he asked. "Drink up." He popped some sunflower seeds into his mouth, chewed, and spit out the shells. Stanley was afraid to drink it. He hated to think what kind of vile substance Mr. Sir might have put in it. He brought the canteen back to his hole. For a long time he left it beside his hole as he continued to dig. Then, when he was so thirsty he hardly couldn't stand it anymore, he unscrewed the cap, turned the canteen over, and poured out all the water into the dirt. He was afraid that if he waited another second, he might actually take a drink. After Stanley taught Zero the final 6 letters of the alphabet, he taught him how to write his name: capital Z, lowercase e, lowercase r, lowercase 0. Zero wrote the letters as Stanley said them. "Zero," he said, looking at the piece of paper. His smile was too big for his face. Stanley watched him write it over and over and over again. 0, 0, 0, 0. In a way, it made him sad. He couldn't help think that 100 times 0 was still nothing. "You know that's not my real name," Zero said as they headed back to the rec room. "Well, yeah," Stanley said. "I guess I knew that." He never really was sure. "Everyone has always called me Zero. even before I came here. Oh, okay. My real name is Hector. Hector? Stanley repeated. Hector Zeroni. Remember that Zeroni name from earlier in the book? Chapter 28. After 20 years, Kate Barlow returned to Green Lake. It was a place where no one would ever find her, a ghost on a ghost lake. The peach trees had all died, but there were a couple of small oak trees still growing by an abandoned old cabin. Does that sound familiar? Hope you're starting to see all the connections here. The cabin used to be on the eastern shore of the lake. Now the edge of the lake was over 5 miles away, and it was a little more than a small pond full of dirty water. She lived in the cabin. Sometimes she could hear Sam's voice echoing across the emptiness. Onions! Sweet, fresh onions! She knew she was crazy. She knew she'd been crazy for the last 20 years. Oh, Sam, she would say, speaking into the vast emptiness. I know it is hot, but I'm still feeling so cold. My hands are cold, my feet are cold, my face is cold, my heart is cold. And sometimes she would hear him say, I can fix that. And she'd feel his warm arm across her shoulders. She'd been living in the cabin almost 3 months when she was awoken one morning by someone kicking open the cabin door. She opened her eyes to see a blurry end of a rifle 2 inches from her nose. She could smell Trout Walker's dirty feet. You've got exactly 10 seconds to tell us where you've hidden your loot, said Trout, or else I'll shoot you. She yawned. A red-headed woman was there, with Trout. Kate could see her rummaging through the cabin, dumping drawers, knocking things over from shelves. The woman came to her. Where is it? She demanded. Linda Miller? Kate asked. Is that you? Linda Miller had been in her 4th grade when Kate Barlow was still a teacher. She'd been a cute, freckle-faced girl with beautiful red hair. Now her face was blotchy, her hair was dirty and scraggly. It's Linda Walker now, said Trout. Oh, Linda, I'm so sorry, said Kate. Trout jabbed her throat with the rifle. Where's the loot? There is no loot, said Kate. Don't give me that, shouted Trout. You've robbed every bank from here to Houston. You better tell him, said Linda. We're desperate. You married him for his money, didn't you? Asked Kate. Linda nodded. But it's all gone. It dried up with the lake, the peach trees, the livestock. I kept thinking, it has to rain soon. The drought can't last forever. But it just kept getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Her eyes fixed on the shovel, which was leaned against the fireplace. She's buried it, she declared. I don't know what you're talking about, said Kate. There was a loud blast as Trout fired his rifle just above her head. The window behind her shattered. Where's it buried? He demanded. Go ahead and kill me, Trout, said Kate, but I sure hope you like to dig, because you're going to be digging for a long time. It's a big, vast wasteland out there. You and your children and your children's children can dig for the next 100 years, and you'll still never find it. Linda grabbed Kate's hair and jerked her back. Oh, we're not going to kill you, she said, but by the time we're finished with you, you are going to wish you were dead. I've been wishing I was dead for the last 20 years, said Kate. They dragged her out of bed and pushed her outside. She wore blue silk pajamas. Her turquoise-studded black boots remained beside her bed. They loosely tied her legs together so that she could walk, but she couldn't run. They made her walk barefoot on the hot ground. They wouldn't let her stop walking. Not until you take us to the loot, said Trout. Linda hit Kate on the back of the legs with her shovel. You're going to take us sooner or later, so you might as well do it sooner. She walked one way, then the other, until her feet were black and blistered. Whenever she stopped, Linda whacked her with the shovel. I'm losing my patience, warned Trout. She felt the shovel jab her into the back, and she fell hard on the dirt. Get up, ordered Linda. Kate struggled to her feet. We're being too easy on you today, said Trout. It's going to get worse and worse for you until you take us to it. Look out, shouted Linda. A lizard leaped toward them. Kate could see its big red eyes. Linda tried to hit it with the shovel, and Trout shot at it, but both missed. The lizard landed on Kate's bare ankle. Its sharp black teeth bit into her leg. Its long white tongue lapped up the droplets of blood that leaked out of her wound. Kate smiled. There's nothing they can do to her any more. Start digging, said Linda. Where is it? Screeched Linda. Where'd you bury it? Trout demanded. And Kate Barlow died laughing. And that is the end of part 1 of Holes. So I want you to think back and think about some of the connections. We're hearing the word Zeroni from the beginning of the story. We're hearing about some turquoise boots that were left by Kissin' Kate Barlow in the cabin. So can't wait to start part 2. See you soon.